only data can trump politics. So I think it's important to get your data and extract value from that data. Out of the specifications, go and get what is that value to your customer.
Coffee's for closers only.
So we've established my proposal is sound in principle. Now we're just haggling over price.
Let's see how much we're going for on eBay.
Man, it's the same as Dunkin' Donuts. Costs 15 times the price.
Today's podcast is sponsored by Jennings Executive Search. I had a great conversation with John Jennings about the skills needed in different pricing roles. He and I think a lot alike. If you're looking for a new pricing role, or if you're trying to hire just the right pricing person, I strongly suggest you reach out to Jennings Executive Search. They specialize in placing pricing people. Say that 3 times fast. Welcome to Impact Pricing, the podcast where we discuss pricing, value, and the trusting relationship between them. I'm Mark Stiving, and our guest today is Stéphane Joanis. And here are 3 things you want to know about Stephane before we start. He started life as a chemical engineer. So did my brother, by the way. He got into pricing and business at Thermo Fisher, and he just launched his own consulting business. Oh, and by the way, he's currently reading my new book, Selling Value. If he gives it a plug, I'm paying him $1. Welcome, Stephane.
Thank you, Mark. I'll take you up on that $1, by the way.
Okay. Hey, how did you get into pricing?
Actually, it actually started earlier in my career as an engineer. In 1993, I was actually working to improve the quality of selenium. And this is a material like a metal, a metalloid. And the price decision was made in an office with my manager. I guess the breeze was pointing in a direction that suggested a modest price increase. So anyways, price was increased on that day based on the whim. And the experience marked me. I always questioned if I could do that better. And then I read the book in 2005, Pricing with Confidence, 10 Ways to Stop Leaving Money on the Table by Reed Holden and Mark Burton.
Yep.
And that marked me profoundly. And from there, I kept on studying pricing, and I've enjoyed the journey.
I tell you what, pricing is a blast. And isn't it funny how we all get into it in a different way, even though we come from someplace else?
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody has a different point of view, which makes it so interesting. There's so much psychology behind it, which, as you pointed out, there's a trust element. I think the trust element is important because of those different point of views. We have to agree to disagree. We have to have a certain level of trust because everybody has a different objective with price. Some want to increase margins, some want to increase share gain, some want to have prices aligned along their product lines. And so how do you get everybody together, and how do you get prices aligned between them? It requires a certain level of trust if you want to do it well, I think.
Oh my gosh, I am so thrilled with what you just said, because we have a 3-minute conversation before I hit record, and he said he wanted to talk about trust. And I was thinking, we need to make sure our customers trust us. But no, he's thinking inside a company, we need to build trust around the organization. That's phenomenal. And so how do you do that, or have you had to do that? Because if you think about it, every department cares about pricing and they care about it differently.
Yeah, great question, Mark. And, I think that was one of the reasons why I volunteered for this podcast, is because it's so dear and entrenched in my heart. How can I say it? So when you look at trust between organizations, my experience way back, I actually used to do relational marketing. I built an organization of 250 people, customers, through coaching people. And we did that in 6 months. And I actually created work session, worked with people, coached people, and we really had a tremendous success with that. I've applied the same type of methodology in business, in creating monthly work sessions, a work session which was designed to really do a deep dive of some of the issues beyond pricing, beyond measuring pricing, looking at the commercial team. So we actually involved people in product management and the commercial team in finance to address things, but not in a way where you attack people, but you attack the processes. You're really looking at the business problems. And so it has to be a safe environment where everybody can pitch in. And also it helps people to realize the implication of their decisions on other functional groups. And this is what was so powerful behind it, because then we start to align and we really got results.
Yeah, I think that's a fabulous answer. I remember I've been in pricing. I mean, I've been a pricing expert for forever, but I didn't learn this lesson until probably midway through my pricing career. And it was fascinating because I had a mentor who taught me how he did things. And what he did was he went around to every single department and had interviews and one-on-ones and conversations. And he wanted to know, what was your goal? Right? What are the things you're trying to get accomplished? What are the problems you see with pricing? And he took everybody's thoughts into consideration as he was making decisions, building proposals. It was truly fabulous. I learned so much from him, and I'll never forget it. I'm super grateful to him.
And I think one of the areas about trust, what I've realized over time is that you can find a lot of analysts and very good pricing analysts that will find pricing opportunities for their clients. There's another aspect of pricing, which is a coaching, which is the organizational transformation. And that is a tougher one to address. And that's where I found I actually provided more value in the long run. And that's what led me to build my business and create my business, SJ Performance LLC, to be able to guide that organizational transformation with a trust environment where the organization is going in the direction in a very structured way, with the least resources as possible and maximum results.
Okay, so what are the tricks? Organizational transformation is, first off, do we call this change management, or is it much bigger than that?
I think it's bigger than change management. Organizational transformation is to actually create a mindset towards having powerful results, asking the right questions, and not being afraid to ask those questions, because you've created an environment where people are seeking to advance. They're seeking for the same goal, for the business to make more profitability, for the business to succeed. And I think that the organizational transformation requires to go through paradigm shifts, and definitely requires executive sponsorship. It's mission critical. Without executive sponsorship, you're going to hit stumbling blocks because of paradigms. And that's where the organizational transformation, I think that's the key to organizational transformation. It's not just about a process, it's about the people as well.
Okay, so organizational transformation is a really nice word. Mm-hmm. We're going to transform from what to what?
We're going to transform from conventional pricing practices to value-based pricing. You're looking not just, when I look at value-based pricing, I'm not just looking at the price of a product, but I'm looking also at the communication of your price. It has to involve your marketing team. Not just communicating specifications, but communicating a value to a customer. It involves the sales team asking the right questions, understanding the type of question to ask to get implications. I've found if you ask questions and you get the customer to be part of the decision process, once a decision is made, the customer will defend its decision much more than they will defend yours. So yes. It's important to involve them. The implication question, this goes with the spin selling from Neil Rackham. He made a study on over 35,000 sales calls. And there's a type of question that really led to success, at least in the instrumentation business or in the business where you have a more complex business. The implication question gets your customer to realize the implication of not having your solution. So we can sell value, but the fear of losing is greater than the desire to gain in many cases. So you have to show what the customer is losing for them to truly appreciate what you have to offer and the value of your product and service.
Okay, so this is standard prospect theory, behavioral economics, love that. And I like that you said that. What's the trick to getting someone to perceive something as a loss instead of something as a gain?
The trick to see something as a loss versus gain. I think the more powerful way is to actually look at some of the historical behavior and provide insights in terms of here are the decisions that were taken, and here's the alternative path that could have been chosen. And here's the opportunity that was missed. It makes it real because it's actually based on the data from your customer.
Okay, so I'm going to say what you just said, but I'm going to put it in very abstract terms that I think are much simpler.
All right.
And that is, I'm going to convince you that you need to throw this switch. Now, I can either tell you that once you throw this switch, you're going to make a lot more money, or I'm going to tell you that if you'd thrown this switch a year ago, look at how much money you just lost. How did that sound?
If you look at the year, I've got to reflect on this one, Mark.
So I just took the exact same thing, throwing the switch, and I said, in future sense, it's a gain. In past sense, it's a loss. And by the way, I just made this up because of what you said, not because I've thought about this deeply.
No, I understand. Well, I guess now that you're making me reflect on this, I would want both. Definitely the loss is important because it's a loss. It's real. And there's a fear of losing more of that. But I would definitely want to measure the opportunity in the future. And so here's the value now of doing it, which may actually be greater than the loss that you've experienced. But now you've got some data that shows you that it's realizable. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. I in fact, as you're reading my book, you'll notice I talk about value tables a lot. And the value tables, what's the value of some feature? What's the value of some product? And I might have to restructure my thinking that instead of saying, what's the value of changing this? It's, well, how much value did you lose last year because you didn't do this? And I think the loss might be more powerful than the gain. I think that's a really interesting insight.
Well, I'm glad I'm able to provide insight, Mark.
Okay, let's jump back to, I asked, how do you transform an organization? You started talking about a bunch of different departments, and you were talking about, if I put it in my language, you were talking about how do I get them to all have a value-based mindset? So how do I get them to all start thinking about the value customers perceive from our products? How do you do that? I mean, I find this really challenging to get people to want to learn about value.
I guess, well, in your book, you mentioned many times, by the way, I enjoy your book, Value Selling. It's great. I'm really enjoying, I'm right now reading the part about the value discussion. I'm right in the middle of it. But I would say, okay, I'm sorry.
By the way, thank you, Stephane. I'm only giving you $1. I'm not giving you multiple dollars. No, go ahead. I'm just joking. Go.
Yeah. So how do we extract value? Well, the first thing is I would talk about specifications versus value drivers and perceived value, as you point in your book. The perceived value and willingness to pay are what it's about. But sometimes it requires to make an observation or to show what is not value. And so a specification, let's use a ball bearing. There's nothing simpler than a ball bearing maybe, or no, actually there's probably things that are simpler, but let's look at the basic ball bearing. Everybody can picture it in their mind. You can have a ball bearing that's 3-inch, 3 feet, 20 feet in diameter. There's a perception that the larger ball bearing is going to be more expensive. But having said that, if you start to dig into it, you look, it's like, okay, it's a 1-inch, 2-inch, or you look at your precision, 1 micron versus 0.001 micron. Okay, that's a specification. So what? But you start to look at value, and the 0.001 micron, and I'm just making up right here, that could pertain to the aviation industry. There might be an application where they require this to be able to fly in the air and make sure that nothing breaks down. Now you're talking about value. So why is 0.001 micron important to the customer? And in the customer's eye is where you derive that value. So how do you bring that to the team? I think you provide examples of very simple examples of specification language versus value language to make that contrast until people really get it. You may actually bring a few examples repetitively from one session to the other. People eventually get it. That perceived value is so important. And you have to be careful not just to take just the pluses, but you have to take the pluses and the minus. Sometimes we might be drinking too much of our own Kool-Aid. That's why you want people from different functional groups, so that way we can keep each other in check.
Yeah, how often do we look at something our competitors do better and just say, oh, that's not important?
It was important to them.
Right. Well, it's probably important to somebody, and it would be good for us to understand why and how and what's going on there.
And a way to find out if it's important, and maybe to stop asking just our customers and maybe look at other people's customers and ask them the question, what's important to you? We might find that we are dealing with different customers or different markets altogether.
Yeah, oftentimes it's different market segments because they have different problems to solve.
Correct. Right.
And so I think another thing you just pointed out, which is really valuable to all of us, is we should be talking to our customers and we should be talking to our competitors' customers. Right. I think win-loss, I don't think I've written this in any of my books, but we talked about it in pragmatic training a lot. Win-loss is such an important skill or task or whatever you want to call it, but we all ought to be doing it and understanding why do we win deals and why do we lose deals, because that should shape almost everything we think about in our business, our products, our marketing, our sales techniques, almost everything.
And I would say I'd be careful with a win rate sometimes, the loss rate. Because sometimes you may not be winning something, but it's not a loss. Sometimes a customer just abandoned the idea and they're not buying it, period. Not from you, not from anybody else. And so we have to be careful not to count that necessarily as a loss, which sometimes I see people doing. I do believe the win rate and looking at the tendency in your win rate is actually a good metric in general. It gives you perspective over time.
Yeah, I think it's fair. And in fact, the more we bifurcate or dissect or divide up these different metrics that we tend to use, the more clarity they give us. And I think it's perfectly fair to say win-loss isn't really two metrics, right? Win-loss really is, did we win it? Did a competitor win it? Did they not buy anything?
Right.
And that's a pretty easy way to split up win-loss.
Mark, there was one thing that I really liked in the first parts of your book. You were talking about the win rate, the closing rate, etc. And it made me think of a blog I recently wrote on sales velocity. And sales velocity is a concept that is used, I've seen it with sales operations, where it's a metric to track your sales team and their effectiveness. And essentially what you're measuring is the number of opportunities times the size of your deals, times your win rate. And you divide that by the length of your sales cycle. And this relates to trust. And I'll get to that in a second. But when you look at pricing.
Wait.
Yeah, okay,
give me the formula one more time, because I got to think through this while you say it. I've never used this formula before.
All right. So sales velocity represents dollars based on the number of opportunities that you have, multiplied by the size of those opportunities. So those are dollars.
Okay.
Multiplied by the win rate.
Okay.
Right? So of everything you've been quoting, you have a win rate, and there's the amount of dollars. Now you divide that by the length of your sales cycle. All right. So I'll drive the point here. What happens to the length of a sales cycle if you break the trust of your customer? What methods do they use to make sure that they have the right price and the lowest price they can get?
Oh, by far, we're going to delay it.
Absolutely. RFPs, RFQs, we need 3 quotes, all these different techniques to make sure now that they have the right price. Now, if you build a relationship and you have a relationship customer and they ask you for a price, how long is that sales cycle now? Much shorter.
Not only is the sales cycle shorter, but we're probably winning the deal at a higher price because they trust us.
So in a sales velocity equation, the deal value, the size of your deal has increased. Your win rate has probably increased because you're in an environment of trust. And your sales cycle has decreased. So your total sales velocity is going up because you've created strategies that inspire trust with your customers. Your sales team can now focus on more deals because they're not spending as much time on pricing, RFPs, RFQs, etc. So you reduce also the cost. And there's a great book on trust, which was written by Stephen Covey, called The Speed of Trust. It's a great proposal on the implication of trust in the business environment. It's an economical proposal. And it just shows how everything, your costs go down and everything related to costs and processes in business gets optimized when you have a trust environment. We don't need to go too far. Just go to the nearest airport and you will see the cost attributed to an environment with a lack of trust. It would be nice if we could walk in the plane and just fly, but we can't do that because it's not an environment of trust. And I do appreciate what they're doing. They are checking for everyone. I want to make sure that I'm safe on the plane. But this drives the point of the cost, the extra cost just for the security and for that environment with a lack of trust.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The more trust there is, the lower the costs are, the less checking there is, the less QA, the less QA on the receiving side we have to do. And
the same goes with pricing.
Yes. Okay. So now as a pricing expert, because you trust me, I'm going to raise your price.
I will raise your price to the extent that I'm not breaking your trust. So the willingness to pay comes in mind. Here, I'll give you an example. There's a study that was made around customer service. And what they have found out is that if you mess it up, you have a product that you're selling and you mess it up and you admit to it and then you do the right thing, there's a higher likelihood that the customer will come and buy back from you than if there was not any problem at all in the first place with the order.
Yep.
So let's say we add, because sometimes as pricing experts, we may create some challenges as well. Let's say there was an issue in a process and the price was tripled and the customer buys the product and it's tripled the price that he usually pays, but based on trust, he just bought it. You find out that you made a mistake. What do you do with it? Do you say, he was willing to pay for it and just let him go?
I go to the bank and deposit the check. What?
Yeah, but for the sake of the relationship, so now he notices that you deposit the check and he's paid 3 times the amount for the item. And let's make this in a sense that he realizes that you knew and you took advantage of the situation. And you just deposited in the bank knowing that it was 3 times the price that he normally pays without saying anything. Wouldn't you rather go back to your customer and admit to the issue? We're talking an error here. It's a gross error in price.
I'm completely with you. And I think if there was a huge error in price, I would absolutely go fix it. Right. I mean, that's not an issue. Right. But I think the other side is
2%. I'm not worried about.
We often, in fact, I often teach clients this, to test price increases to see when people start to get upset.
Yep.
And once people start getting upset, then we probably reached the limit. Let's stop doing those price increases.
Agreed.
Now that isn't necessarily based in trust, but it is taking advantage of any trust that I might have built. And so if you think about it, I'm actually getting paid for that trust because of the fact that I can raise my price.
Right. Yes. And you pointed it out in your book. People who get the best price are not necessarily the ones that are. It's not necessarily your biggest customers or best customers. Is the one that negotiate the best. So yeah, there's a price to trust, and a customer that is trusting may pay more. There's also peace of mind to that, and there's a value to that trust. And I think we can charge more based on that trust. They know that we're not going to try to. They know if there's a mistake or there's a problem that they can count on us to do the right thing. That would be my bottom line around it.
Yeah, and so I think we're actually fascinating conversation. I love this, but I think we're talking about things that don't happen as often as we expect, and what we really, if we go back to what we started the conversation with, we have to understand how much value are we delivering to our client. And so even though I'm raising your price, I'm still delivering a ton more value than before I raised your price.
And I'm with you on that. And we should raise it to the point of, point of breakage, the point of where we get a complaint and they're still buying it. That means that, you still have that trust. You've got that willingness to pay. So definitely you're providing that value. And it is known by all parties that that value is set at this higher price point. Yeah, I'm all on board with that.
And when we raise prices, I have this 4-step process for how to raise prices. And we need to make sure we're communicating the fact that, yes, we really are delivering a lot more value than what you thought you were paying for as one of those steps. So
I do use a concept which I call intuitive hearing. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. I think I've coined that one. I look for the level of complaint statistically. I'm expecting some complaints. If you're not getting any complaint on price, you're too low. So I use my intuitive hearing, statistical hearing is what I should have said, my statistical hearing, and I'm looking and gauging what is the percentage of complaints I'm getting in there, because that's what I want. We need to raise that price to that level. And that's the way I talk to my customers.
Yeah, actually, that's an interesting concept. I often think in a similar vein, I often think about the fact that you can't win them all. So we need some optimal loss ratio, right? And so what is that optimal loss ratio? And I have no idea. It depends on the situation and the market and your market share. So.
Yeah, agreed. It's not like in the textbooks. When I did my MBA, they had this textbook with these nice lines that are all straight. So I haven't seen that in the industry yet.
You haven't?
No.
One of my favorite commercials that I often quote in my blogs is Jay Leno's quote that says, this was a commercial he did for Doritos. It says, "Go ahead and crunch them. We can make more." Right? Which essentially says there's no such thing as supply and demand. The more you eat, the more we'll make. It's okay.
Right. Well, that's a good one. I hadn't heard that, so I'm going to keep that.
Yeah, go find the commercial on YouTube. It's pretty cool. So, Stephane, this has been fun, as I expected it would be. But I have to ask you the final question. What's one piece of pricing advice you would give our listeners that you think could have a big impact on their business?
Well, as mentioned, create strategies that build trust and aim for a win-win. But we've covered that. So let's say make database decisions. The answers are in the data. Now, the data is a means to the answer, right? So towards getting insights, but is a foundation. Only data can trump politics. So I think it's important to get your data and extract value from that data. Out of the specifications, go and get what is that value to your customer.
Yeah, I love the answer on data. I actually just published a blog. I think it just came out, and it was talking about the difference between data and value. And I look at data as a great way to validate or verify what you think might be true, but it's really hard to look at data to figure out what's true. To get the ideas, I should say. Right? We have to get the ideas first somewhere, and then we go into the data to say, okay, now is that really true? Is there any evidence for this? So,
I actually wrote a blog maybe 3 weeks ago on data versus insight based on a discussion I had with the product manager. And he was talking about, he was responsible for IoT, so the Internet of Things, and talking about data and trying to get people to really buy in on the idea that data is important. And my response to him is, data is important, but what you want to do is provide insights, because the value is in the insights. Too much data creates confusion and can create work for people to try to figure out, what data do I need to look at? What columns, where do I need to go? And so it is your job to simplify things and provide the insights. Insights for your leadership team that builds your business case, and then insights for your customer, because they're the ones who are buying the product. And that is what's going to provide the return on the investment. It was a great conversation. So a very good topic.
Yeah.
I'm glad we're aligned on this.
Yeah, exactly. Stephane, thank you so much for your time today. If anybody wants to contact you, how can they do that?
Simply, they can go on my website. I'm also on LinkedIn as Stéphane Joanis. To email me would be just to take S, like Stephane, the first letter of my name, followed by my last name. So SJOANIS at SJ Performance Coach. That is SJ standing for Stephane and Josephine, which is my wife's name, because she's an important supporter for my business. And then performancecoach.com.
All right. We'll have that in the show notes as well. And I think you throw in the Josephine line just so you don't get divorced.
You know what? 23 years married to a beautiful Nigerian woman. Tell you, I'm happy.
All right. Episode 174 is all done. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this, would you please leave us a rating and a review? And if you have any colleagues who are interested in pricing, would you please share this podcast with them? And if you have any questions or comments about the podcast or pricing in general, feel free to email me, mark@impactpricing.com. Now, go make an impact. Thanks again to Jennings Executive Search for sponsoring our podcast. If you're looking to hire someone in pricing, I suggest you contact someone who knows pricing people. Contact Jennings Executive Search.